She searched it at 11:48 p.m., not after he died, before. How long does antifreeze take to kill someone? 2 weeks later, her husband would be dead. And what made the case disturbing wasn't just what happened to him. It was how calmly she waited for it to happen. On the surface, Grace looked exactly like the kind of person no one would question. 32, married for 5 years, organized, soft-spoken, the kind of person who remembered everything. Appointments, birthdays, details. Neighbors described the couple as quiet, not distant, not troubled, just normal. Her husband, David, lived by routine. Same coffee, same chair, same time every morning. Predictable, comfortable, and completely unaware. If there were problems in the marriage, they didn't show. No shouting, no reports, no visible cracks. But most fractures don't start loudly. They build quietly. 3 months before his death, Grace searched again. Can poisoning symptoms look like the flu? Still harmless, still explainable, still invisible. David didn't collapse overnight. He declined slowly. Fatigue first, then nausea, then headaches that stayed longer than they should. He dismissed it. Work stress, lack of sleep. Nothing serious, Grace noticed. Of course she did. She adjusted meals, suggested medication, encouraged rest, supportive, attentive, exactly what you'd expect. And that's what made it impossible to see. Because nothing she did looked wrong. Everything fit. 2 weeks before his death, the searches changed. More specific, more direct. Does antifreeze have a taste? Can it be detected after death? And then, how much is lethal for an adult? Still no incident, no sudden event, just progression, controlled, measured. David grew weaker, more disoriented. At one point, he mentioned something strange, a sweetness in his drink. He laughed it off, said it was probably nothing. Grace didn't correct him. She smiled, calm, steady, certain. The night it happened felt normal. Dinner, television, silence, routine. At 9:12 p.m., David stood up. He said he felt dizzy. Grace told him to sit. Her voice was even, controlled. Minutes later, he collapsed. No chaos, no struggle, just stillness. And Grace waited. Not long, but long enough. At 9:18 p.m., she called 911. My husband just collapsed. I think something's wrong. Her voice was calm, clear, structured, too structured. Paramedics arrived quickly. They worked efficiently, but it was already over. David was pronounced dead at the hospital. Initial conclusion: natural causes, and for a moment, that's exactly what it looked like, because nothing in that house suggested violence. No forced entry, no visible injury, no reason to question it, just a quiet home, a calm wife, and a death that didn't make sense. But deaths that don't make sense don't stay quiet for long. 2 days later, toxicology was requested. Routine, precautionary, nothing unusual, until it came back. And that's when everything changed. The toxicology report didn't come back dramatic. It came back precise. Ethylene glycol, commonly found in antifreeze, lethal in small amounts, colorless, sweet, difficult to detect without testing. At first, the result raised more questions than answers, because antifreeze doesn't just appear, it has to be introduced. Investigators returned to the house, quietly, methodically. They started with the kitchen, glasses, utensils, the sink. Everything looked normal, clean, too clean. There were no visible signs of contamination, no residue, no obvious container. But absence doesn't eliminate intent. Sometimes it suggests preparation. David's drinking habits were simple: water, occasional juice. Nothing unusual, nothing that would mask a taste easily, which made one detail stand out. 3 days before his death, Grace had purchased a new bottle of orange juice. Same brand, same packaging, but a different batch. Receipt confirmed, Time-stamped, 8:14 p.m. Investigators tested what remained of it. Trace amounts. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to matter. That's when the timeline began to tighten. They pulled Grace's phone records, search history, timestamps, patterns. The first search had seemed like curiosity, the second, explainable. But now in sequence, they looked like steps. How long does antifreeze take to kill someone? Can poisoning symptoms look like the flu? Does it have a taste? How much is lethal? Not random, not scattered, structured. And structure, in cases like this, rarely happens by accident. Grace was brought in for questioning. She didn't resist, didn't hesitate, didn't ask why. She sat down calmly, hands folded, posture steady. At first, everything aligned. She described David's illness the same way she had before. Gradual, confusing, unexpected. Her tone matched her words. Concerned, measured, controlled. Investigators didn't interrupt. They let her talk, and she did. But when they introduced the toxicology results, something shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, subtle. Her shoulders tightened, just slightly. Her responses became shorter, more careful, still calm, but no longer fluid. They asked about the orange juice. She explained it easily, said she had bought it like she always did. Routine, nothing unusual. And that was true, but truth, when incomplete, can still mislead. They asked about the searches. There was a pause, the first real one. I read things sometimes, she said. True crime, articles, just curiosity. It was plausible, but not convincing, because curiosity doesn't usually follow a sequence. It jumps, it wanders, it forgets. This didn't. This moved forward, step by step. Then they asked a different question. Why antifreeze? Another pause. Longer this time. She looked down, then back up. I don't know, she said, and for the first time, she didn't sound certain. Investigators leaned in. They didn't accuse, they didn't push, they just stayed quiet. Silence has a way of doing that. It fills space, forces thought, breaks rhythm. And rhythm was what Grace had been relying on. Her control was built on it. Answer, pause, answer. But now the rhythm was gone. They presented the purchase record, the toxicology report, the search history, not as accusations, as alignment. And alignment is harder to argue against, because it doesn't shout, it settles. Grace adjusted her posture, shifted in her seat, uncrossed her hands, then crossed them again. Micro movements, small but visible, the kind investigators are trained to notice. They asked one final question. Did you know what would happen? Silence. This time she didn't answer immediately. Seconds passed. Then she spoke. I didn't think it would happen like that. Not a confession, but not denial either. Just enough. Enough to change direction. She was arrested the following morning. The charge, second-degree murder. At trial, the prosecution didn't rely on emotion. They relied on sequence, search, purchase, symptoms, delay, death. Each step placed carefully, each detail connected. The defense argued uncertainty, suggested accidental contamination, raised doubt, but doubt struggles against structure, and Grace had left a structure behind, one search at a time. The verdict came after 7 hours. Guilty. Grace showed little reaction, no outburst, no collapse, just stillness. The same stillness that had followed every step. And in the end, that may have been the most revealing detail of all. Because panic is unpredictable, messy, uncontrolled. But this wasn't. This was planned. And sometimes the most dangerous decisions aren't made in the moment. They're made quietly, in the dark, with a search bar.